Here is a roughly 700-word expansion of Keynote Number 1, with no headings and no ending-style sentences. They expected the first hour to be enough. That was the pattern with most people. Shock them with the sudden loss of control, strip away the comforts they lean on without thinking, and the cracks start to show. The nervous tics, the shallow breaths, the eyes darting for exits that are not there. For her, none of that came. She sat in the cold room, wrists bound, posture steady, watching the door as if she were the one waiting for them to talk. It set an offbeat tone right from the start, something that irritated the team running the operation. They relied on predictable reactions. She refused to give them one. By the third hour, they increased the pressure. Not physical harm, but tactics meant to destabilize the mind. Harsh lights, sudden silence followed by sudden noise. Questions asked with no context and no follow-up. Long minutes with no one in the room. Long minutes with too many people in the room. Everything designed to create a sense of imbalance. Most people start to lose track of time. She did not. Every shift of light, every footstep in the hallway, every click of the lock was counted. Her captors thought they were wearing her down, but all they were doing was feeding her data she quietly organized. They rotated interrogators to keep her from forming a rhythm, but she had already built her own. Breath in for 4 seconds. Hold for 2. Exhale for 4. Reset the mind. She never resisted. She never fought. She simply refused to break. The more time passed, the more obvious it became that this was not someone they could push into confession or panic. The temperature in the room dropped slightly in the 7th hour, an intentional tactic meant to amplify discomfort, but she shifted only once to preserve heat. No complaint, no outburst, just controlled presence. By hour 12, they expected fatigue, mental fog, a slip in posture or tone. Instead, she was sharper. When they demanded answers, she studied the ones speaking as if evaluating their weaknesses. It was not defiance. It was observation. She answered only with what was harmless, nothing more, nothing less, each word chosen with precision. They tried to provoke her with false accusations. They tried to unsettle her with staged arguments among themselves. She watched the performance without reacting, noting who played which role, who leaned into the act too hard, who doubted the script they were following. At hour 18, one of them suggested she must have military training. Another disagreed, saying she was too calm, too controlled, too aware. They were used to people who pretended to be tough. They were not used to someone who simply was. Her heart rate stayed low even when they changed tactics again, this time switching to tighter time intervals between interrogations. 5 minutes alone, 10 minutes under interrogation, 3 minutes alone, 15 under pressure. She adapted to every shift without hesitation. They were trying to break her sense of continuity, but she moved through each phase as if she had trained for this exact scenario. By the 24th hour, frustration had begun to spread among the team. Small mistakes appeared in their process. A question repeated twice. A threat delivered with less conviction. A long pause before someone decided which tactic to use next. Their discipline was slipping while hers remained untouched. They did not understand why she had not begged, why she had not bargained, why she had not lashed out. Pain is easy to provoke. Fear is easy to manipulate. Silence mixed with confidence is something else. Something that makes the one in control feel suddenly less so. As the hours stacked into the 30s and 40s, their strategy shifted from aggression to curiosity. They wanted to know who had trained her. They wanted to know why she behaved like this. They tried to corner her with contradictions, but she never walked into a trap. They tried to isolate her with claims that no one was coming for her, but her expression never changed. They tried to rush her with rapid-fire questions, but she kept her breathing steady, forcing their tempo to match hers instead of the other way around. By hour 50, the room felt smaller, not for her, but for them. This was supposed to be their arena. They were the ones with numbers, tools, authority. Yet she was the constant, the fixed point they could not move. Her restraint was not passive. It was deliberate, disciplined, and rooted in something none of them could yet identify. The closer they got to the 72-hour mark, the more the balance tilted. Their confidence thinned. Their assumptions failed. Her endurance was no longer simply impressive. It was unsettling. They noticed it before they noticed anything else. The calm. It was not the forced stillness of someone trying too hard to hide fear. It was natural, steady, almost practiced. When the door opened and the harsh light hit her face, she looked up with the same quiet focus she had held from the beginning. No flinch, no hesitation, just presence. It threw off the rhythm of the people watching her from behind the glass. They expected the usual reactions: raised shoulders, rapid blinking, a quick intake of breath. She gave them none of it, and the absence of fear was louder than any outburst could have been. Every interrogator who stepped into the room felt it within the first minute. She did not shrink from their questions. She did not brace for what might come next. She simply existed in the space with a level of composure that made them second-guess their own approach. They were trained to dominate the environment. She treated the environment as something she had already mapped out. Her eyes never darted. They moved with purpose, slow and controlled, logging the details she needed while giving nothing away. The calm was not for them. It was for her. A mental anchor. A reminder that no one could control her internal state unless she let them. They tried changing their tactics to disrupt the steady energy radiating off her. One interrogator came in loud, pacing the room, slamming hands on the table. She watched him, not with fear, but with curiosity. Another entered speaking softly, pretending to sympathize, hoping to slip under her guard. She listened, but she did not respond with emotion. When they asked pointed questions designed to corner her, she answered in a tone so level it bordered on unsettling. No sarcasm, no panic, just clarity. Her calm acted like a mirror, and it reflected back everything they hoped she would feel but did not. As hours passed, it became something more than simple composure. It became a force that spread through the room. People who had walked in with confidence left feeling like they had missed something important. Her steadiness made them question their assessments. She was supposed to be vulnerable. Instead, she was the most stable person in the building. Even when they raised the temperature or lowered it, even when they switched the lighting or manipulated the noise levels, she stayed even. A slight shift of posture, a controlled breath, small, precise movements that kept her body in balance and her mind untouched. The psychological games that usually worked so well on others began to collapse around her. When they left her alone in the dark, expecting the silence to erode her resolve, she sat with her eyes open, breathing slow and deep, as if the darkness made her stronger. When they flooded the room with bright light, hoping to overwhelm her senses, she closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, letting the glare settle without resistance. Her calm was not passive. It was active. It was a choice she made every second. Interrogators started whispering among themselves in the hall. Something about her felt off. Not dangerous in the physical sense, but unsettling in the way a person with nothing to fear can be. They pulled up her background again, searching for indicators they had missed. The calm did not crack even when they threw false information at her, hoping to provoke a reaction. She listened and let them speak. When they finished, she tilted her head slightly, not confused, not intimidated, but measuring them. It was the kind of look reserved for people who know the truth and do not need to defend it. By the 20th hour, the dynamic had already shifted. She was no longer the one under observation. They were. Every interrogator stepping into the room entered with a hint of tension, because they knew she would study their posture, their breathing, their tone. They knew she would sense every inconsistency. She forced them to confront their own uncertainty without ever speaking more than a few words. Her calm made them feel exposed, as if she could see through their strategies before they used them. When they tried to confront her with aggressive accusations, she responded with the same steady voice she had used from the start. When they tried to overwhelm her with speed and noise, she slowed herself down even more, grounding her thoughts until the chaos lost its power. The calm was not silence. It was control. It was a message they did not yet understand. This quiet strength built its own tension, the kind that fills a room without anyone raising their voice, the kind that leaves skilled professionals doubting their own instincts, the kind that hints at a truth they had not discovered yet. Long before the room, long before the questions, long before the 72 hours that were supposed to break her, The real shaping happened in places no one in that building had ever seen. Her resilience did not come from willpower alone. It came from training designed to rebuild the mind from the inside out. Training that taught her how to stay calm under pressure, how to separate instinct from panic, and how to let discomfort pass through her without letting it take root. They believed they were the ones applying pressure for the first time. They had no idea she had spent years learning how to work inside storms far worse. It started with the basics: breath control, awareness, the ability to monitor her own body as if it were a piece of equipment she could tune with precision. She learned early that panic is just a physical reaction, something that can be redirected if caught fast enough. She practiced lowering her heart rate on command, even after intense physical exertion. She trained with instructors who did not accept half measures. If her breathing faltered, they reset the drill. If her focus scattered, she started again. Slowly, the skills became automatic. Pressure did not feel like an attack. It felt like an equation she already knew how to solve. Then came the mental conditioning. Long nights with minimal sleep, not to create exhaustion, but to teach the brain to stay sharp despite it. Simulations built to overwhelm her senses, teaching her to find order in chaos. Situations where communication was limited, forcing her to trust her internal logic and instincts without second-guessing. Every scenario was designed to strip away the illusion of comfort and expose her to the kind of stress that would make most people fold. She learned to stay centered even when everything around her demanded reaction. She learned that emotion can be a tool only when controlled, and a weapon against you when it takes over. Physical training played its part too, but not in the obvious way. Strength mattered, of course, but endurance mattered more. Not just the kind measured in miles or hours, but the kind that trains a person to stay steady when the body has nothing left to give. She pushed through drills that tested every limit she thought she had, only to realize she had more. Her instructors pushed her right to the edge, not to break her, but to show her that she could step past it. She learned how to function under strain, how to make decisions when muscles trembled and lungs burned. It taught her something her captors never understood. Endurance is not about ignoring pain. It is about understanding it, then moving anyway. The most important training came from the moments that looked ordinary from the outside. Quiet hours spent studying human behavior, learning how people reveal themselves through their tone, their rhythm, the way they shift their weight from one foot to the other. She learned how to read tension in a jawline, how to hear doubt in a question, how to sense when someone was bluffing. The skill became so ingrained she no longer realized she was using it. In the room, during those long 72 hours, it allowed her to understand her interrogators better than they understood her. They acted as if they held the upper hand. She saw the cracks the moment they appeared. Another part of her training focused on compartmentalization, not suppressing thoughts, but organizing them. She learned how to separate immediate tasks from emotional responses, how to store stress without being ruled by it, how to prioritize clarity over fear. This did not make her unfeeling. It made her effective. When faced with pressure, her mind did not scatter. It locked onto what mattered. It let the noise pass by without dragging her into it. Her captors mistook this for indifference. It was discipline, built from years of repetition. Team training also shaped her resolve. She learned to operate with people who depended on her as much as she depended on them. She learned that staying calm is not just a personal asset, but a responsibility. Panic spreads fast. Composure spreads faster. During complex operations, she became the steady point the team anchored to, and that role rewired something inside her. Once you learn to be the one others rely on, it becomes part of who you are. Even alone in that room, she carried that identity with her. It was not arrogance. It was duty. She trained in scenarios designed to blur the line between physical and psychological pressure, learning how to make decisions when everything felt uncertain. She learned to avoid reacting impulsively. She learned how to measure every detail before responding. These skills became second nature. In the room, her silence was not an act. It was strategy. Her stillness was not fear. It was assessment. Her calm was not fragile. It was engineered. All the pieces of her training converged into a single truth. Her resilience was not a shield she hoped would hold. It was a structure built over years, tested again and again, refined until it became part of her identity. Her captors misread it as luck or stubbornness. They never realized they were facing the result of training designed for moments exactly like the one they had created. They did not notice the shift at first. It came quietly, slipping into the room between a routine question and a routine silence. An interrogator leaned forward, expecting the same steady answer she had given for hours, but this time she did not speak. She looked at him instead, not with defiance, not with fear, but with a level of clarity that made him pause mid-sentence. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. For the first time he wondered if they had been playing the wrong game. The realization did not come from anything she said. It came from what she no longer needed to say. The team behind the glass saw it too. They watched her eyes track the interrogator's movements, not casually, but with precision. She was not reacting to him. She was evaluating him. Every shift in his tone, every twitch in his shoulders, every inconsistency in his questions registered in her mind. They had always assumed she was bracing herself against their tactics. It became clear she was studying them instead. The calm that had unsettled them earlier now took a new form. It was not passive control. It was active analysis, and it turned the dynamic on its head. When the next interrogator entered, she watched him take a seat. She noticed how he tried to appear relaxed. She noticed the way he tapped his thumb against his forefinger when he asked something he did not quite believe. She noticed the moment hesitation crept into his voice. He asked a question meant to corner her, but she caught the slight drop in confidence behind it. She answered with a single sentence that matched his tone perfectly, and he faltered. He looked down at his notes as if they suddenly weren't enough. She had seen the moment his confidence cracked. The people behind the glass had seen it too. The team switched interrogators again, trying to regain momentum. A younger operative came in, one who had a reputation for pushing people to their limits. He paced around her, trying to create the illusion of control. She followed his movements with slow, deliberate turns of her head. When he jabbed his finger on the table, demanding she respond, she blinked once and held his gaze. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more power than any outburst could have. He shifted his weight, suddenly unsure whether he was leading the exchange or reacting to her. By the time he walked out of the room, the observers were already whispering. She had said almost nothing, yet she had turned the atmosphere in her direction. They watched her sit there, quiet and composed, while they scrambled to decide on the next tactic. It became clear she had begun to dictate the pace. Every time they raised their intensity, she slowed her breathing. Every time they tried to disrupt her rhythm, she moved back into her own. They tried to force urgency. She created stillness, and the stillness made them question their own strategy. One of the senior interrogators stepped into the room next, hoping experience would give him the upper hand. He started slow, speaking in measured sentences, trying to regain the authority slipping from the team. She listened, but the calm in her eyes did not shift. Then he made a small misstep. He referenced a detail she had not been told yet. His voice did not waver, but his timing did. She caught it instantly. Her head turned a fraction, subtle but sharp. The senior interrogator felt it too. He broke eye contact for a moment longer than he intended. That single hesitation confirmed what she had been piecing together since the start. From that moment on, they were no longer evaluating her. They were trying to figure out what she already knew. The confidence they had walked in with began to thin. They checked files again. They reviewed footage again. They questioned whether she was trained beyond what her record suggested. They wondered if she could read them more easily than they could read her. The uncertainty spread through the team until it became impossible to ignore. The room felt different when she entered for the next round. The interrogators no longer stood as tall. Their attempts at intimidation felt rehearsed. They started second-guessing their lines, double-checking their notes, adjusting their tone as if hoping to hide the cracks she had already found. She was no longer the variable in their equation. She was the constant. They were the ones shifting, compensating, recalibrating. She answered their questions the same way she always had, but now each answer carried weight because they had begun to fear what she withheld. They watched her posture, her breath, her timing, trying to predict her reactions. Yet they could not read her the way she read them. Her silence felt sharper now. Her stillness felt intentional. They realized she had been ahead of them from the start. The moment they truly understood came when an interrogator asked a question he thought would catch her off guard. She leaned back slightly, not defensive, simply patient. Then she looked at him with an expression that said she already knew where the question came from. The team froze behind the glass. She had traced their strategy before they finished forming it. They walked into the room believing they held control. She showed them, piece by piece, that control had never belonged to them. The reason a Navy SEAL never folds under pressure is not a single lesson, a single experience, or a single moment of strength. It is a collection of choices made long before the pressure arrives. It starts with understanding that fear is natural, but control is earned. Every SEAL learns early that the mind will give up long before the body does, and the only way to overcome that truth is to redefine what giving up even means. They learn to step into discomfort instead of avoiding it. They learn to stay steady when everything around them pushes for panic. They learn to trust the training that has layered itself into their instincts until it becomes impossible to separate who they are from what they have learned. In her case, that resolve came from years of being pushed in ways that were not meant to break her, but to reveal her limits so she could surpass them. During selection, she learned what pressure really felt like. Not the pressure of a single moment, but pressure that stretches across hours and days, digging into the mind more than the muscles. She learned how to keep going when exhaustion whispered that stopping would feel easier. She learned the discipline of controlling her breath when adrenaline surged through her body. She learned to stay present when her thoughts tried to scatter. These lessons built a mental structure that does not collapse the moment someone tries to push it. Pressure becomes a familiar companion when you have trained for it the way she had. She understood that staying calm is not about ignoring stress. It is about acknowledging it, then telling it where to stand. That mindset shifts everything. When people are confronted with fear or uncertainty, most try to fight it. SEALs learn to guide it. They turn fear into awareness. They turn stress into focus. They turn pressure into a reminder that they have been here before, even if the situation is new. It is not arrogance. It is conditioning earned through repetition that leaves no room for doubt. Another reason a SEAL never folds lies in the relationship between the mission and the self. They are taught that personal discomfort cannot outweigh the purpose they serve. The mind becomes trained to ask a simple question when faced with strain. Does this feeling matter more than what I'm here to do? The answer, every time, becomes no. That framework rewires how they interpret difficulty. Hard moments stop feeling like threats. They become checkpoints, markers on a path they already expect to walk. She carried that mindset into the room, even though her mission then was survival, not action. They also learn early on that pressure tests clarity, and clarity is a tool they must protect at all costs. The ability to think under stress is drilled into them until it becomes instinct. Cold water, long runs, tight time limits, complicated tasks executed while muscles shake and lungs burn. All of it serves a simple purpose. When the mind wants to collapse into chaos, they learn how to pull it back into order. That is why she never reacted impulsively. She waited. She watched. She filtered information until only what mattered stayed in focus. This discipline is what kept her steady when her captors expected her to break. There is another layer to their resilience, one often misunderstood. SEALs are not trained to feel nothing. They are trained to manage everything. They are taught to acknowledge their emotions and direct them rather than letting those emotions dictate their choices. Fear becomes manageable when you know how to read it. Pain becomes manageable when you know how to work through it. Stress becomes manageable when you know how to turn it into concentration. She did not ignore what she felt in that room. She simply refused to let her feelings take the lead. Team mindset shapes their resilience too, even when they stand alone. SEALs operate knowing others rely on them. That sense of responsibility becomes part of who they are. Giving up is not simply a personal failure. It is a failure that affects everyone connected to them. Even isolated, even restrained, even without a team in sight, she carried that sense of duty. It reminded her that staying composed was not just about her survival. It was about honoring the training, the people who taught her, and the identity she had earned. Their training also teaches them to expect the unexpected. When situations shift, when plans collapse, when unfamiliar environments threaten to overwhelm, they rely on adaptability. That adaptability kept her from reacting with shock when her captors tried new strategies. She adjusted her breathing. She adjusted her posture. She adjusted her focus. Pressure could not corner her because she always had another angle to work from. She understood that rigidity breaks. Adaptability survives. The final piece is something simple. SEALs carry a quiet belief that they can outlast whatever stands in front of them. It is not spoken out loud, and it is never bragged about. It is internal. It is silent. It is built from every moment they pushed past a point they once thought was the limit. She carried that belief with her during every minute of those 72 hours. She knew she could endure more than her captors expected. She knew she could hold the line they kept trying to push. That belief might have looked like calm from the outside, but inside it was the reason she never folded. They thought they understood the situation. They believed they had mapped out every angle, every possibility, every explanation for her refusal to break. The team behind the glass leaned on experience, training, and the patterns they had seen 100 times before. They told themselves she was stubborn, or scared, or hiding something fragile under the surface. They decided she was someone who could be cracked with enough time and enough pressure. For 72 hours they followed that assumption. Then the reveal came, and everything they believed unraveled at once. It began when one of the senior officers stepped into the room not to interrogate her, but to deliver what he thought was a final warning. He carried a file under his arm. It was meant to intimidate her, to show her they had taken the time to dig into her life. He opened the file, expecting her expression to shift. It did not. She looked at the papers as if she already knew what was inside. The officer flipped the pages with deliberate slowness, narrating details meant to unsettle. Then he stopped. Something in the file caught his eye. He frowned, then flipped back a page. The observers saw the moment confusion overtook his confidence. She watched him, her calm steady, while he looked again, this time faster. The color drained from his face. The team behind the glass leaned forward, sensing something had gone wrong. Another officer rushed in and took the file from his hands. He scanned it, then froze. When he looked up at her, everything about his expression had shifted. The suspicion was gone. The authority was gone. Something else took its place. Recognition. They had assumed she was hiding something dangerous by staying silent. What they had not considered was that she had been cleared at levels far above their jurisdiction. The file contained a directive they had not seen before, one marked in a classification tier they did not have access to. It stated explicitly that her identity, her operations, and her methods were protected under a sealed program. A program tied directly to naval special operations. A program with oversight far beyond the scope of the building they were standing in. The realization hit them all at once. She was not someone pretending to be strong. She was not someone resisting out of fear. She was someone they were never meant to interrogate in the first place. Someone who lived in a world they did not have the clearance to even discuss. They had misjudged her because they had misunderstood the scale of the person sitting in front of them. The senior officer stepped back into the room, this time without the usual posture of dominance. His voice carried hesitation. He said her name, followed by a title he had not used before. She did not react. She simply waited, letting him work through the shock. He apologized, his tone strained and uneasy. He asked why she had not told them, why she had let them continue with their tactics. She looked at him with steady eyes and gave the only answer that made sense. Because it had not been her job to stop them. It had been their job to know who they were dealing with before they ever put her in that chair. The observers behind the glass felt the weight of that truth. Their confidence shattered. Their assumptions collapsed. Every tactic they had used suddenly looked reckless and misguided. They replayed the past 72 hours in their minds and saw everything differently. Every moment she stayed calm. Every question she answered with precision. Every silence that had stretched longer than expected. None of it was defiance. It was discipline. It was professionalism. It was the behavior of someone trained to endure pressure far greater than anything they had applied. The room changed after the reveal. The interrogators avoided each other's eyes. No one wanted to be the first to speak, because whatever they said would expose how deeply they had misread her. One officer whispered that they needed to notify command. Another whispered that this could cost them their careers. No one disagreed. They had overstepped without knowing, and the consequences were already gathering around them. She watched them without gloating, without anger, without any desire for revenge. Her breathing stayed steady, her posture unchanged. She had endured the 72 hours not because she needed to prove anything, but because she understood the rules of her world. She understood that protected information stayed protected no matter the cost. She understood that pressure did not give her permission to reveal what she had sworn to keep, even if it meant enduring more than they realized they were putting her through. The reveal did not just change their understanding of her. It changed their understanding of themselves. They had believed they operated with authority. Now they understood their authority had limits they had never considered. They had believed they were evaluating her strength. Now they understood she had been showing them the true meaning of control. They had believed they were the ones in power. Now they understood the balance of power had never been theirs. The realization settled over them like a weight they could not shake. She had held the line because that was who she was. She had stayed silent because silence was required. She had endured because a Navy SEAL never breaks for the wrong people, in the wrong room, for the wrong reasons.